Thank you for your patience as we get everyone in through the virtual door as it is. While we get everyone in, I'll begin with my welcome to everyone. So hello and welcome to the second episode of Digging In Season 2. I'm Lindsay Randall, the host of the speaker series, and Digging In is a series of live presentations with archaeologists from around the country, co-sponsored by the Robert S. Peabody Museum of Archaeology and the Massachusetts Archaeological Society. Join us every other Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time through June for our presentations. For a schedule of dates, please visit us at peabody.andover.edu and at the Massachusetts Archaeological Society's Facebook page. And if you are enjoying our programming, please consider expanding your impact by becoming a member of the Massachusetts Archaeological Society. We are able to bring you outstanding programming through the support of viewers like you. And don't forget that in only 8 days, February 18th, it's Anthro Day. To find out more about virtual events, visit the American Anthropological Association's website. Today, we are very excited to welcome Dr. Whitney Battle-Baptiste. Dr. Battle-Baptiste is a professor in the Department of Anthropology and director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Center at UMass Amherst. A native of the Bronx, New York, Dr. Battle-Baptiste is a scholar and activist who sees the classroom and the campus as a space to engage contemporary issues with a sensibility of the past. Her academic training is in history and historical archaeology, and her research critically engages the interconnectedness of race, gender, and class and sexuality through an archaeological lens. She is the author of Black Feminist Archaeology and the W.E.B. Du Bois Data Portraits Visualizing Black America, co-edited with Britt Russert. And she is currently completing a second volume of Black Feminist Archaeology. Dr. Battle-Baptiste is also a board member of the Mass Humanities, and the Massachusetts Archaeological Society is grateful for their recent pandemic grant support. At the conclusion of the talk, viewers are able to submit questions directly to me via the chat function on the side of your Zoom screen. And we will then give our speaker time to answer as many of the questions as they can, with the understanding that they might not be able to get to all of them. So welcome, Dr. Battle-Baptiste, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. My cat is making an appearance. Okay. Welcome to COVID times. So thank you so much for having me. I really do want this to be an informal talk, but Lindsay, I think I am gonna share a slideshow, especially because you're talking from Andover, and Andover has a really special place in my heart, and that would be because of the story of Lucy Foster. So I really want to kind of demonstrate and show, I think, what the beauty of how when things come together in archaeology, when you kind of seek to try to find the story of someone who has been written about, but I guess not in the way that I was satisfied with. And that's was kind of my mission when I was trying to figure out how to kind of cover a lot of ground in Black feminist archaeology when I first started writing it. So today I really want to talk to you about the implications of race and anti-Black racism, a little more specifically. I started out doing archaeology in, I guess what some folks would call the area better known as like the Chesapeake Mafia, which is Williamsburg, Jamestown, all those places. So regardless of how radical or how armchair like I start to sound, I did have my, I cut my trowel in the dirt of what is colonial Williamsburg and Jamestown. And so I feel that in some ways, you know, I was trained by people who were extremely focused on the practice of archaeology, the ways in which archaeology impacts the way we see the past. But colonial Williamsburg is a little bit of an anomaly, I guess. You know, it's a place, it's a park that is supposed to be centered or narrowed on, like, you know, before the American Revolution. But what really came out to me was the fact that there was 51% of the population in Williamsburg was of African descent. So they had this great thing called the Other Half Tour. And the Other Half Tour, it was a really, really interesting experience. I took it from the beginnings, but that's also when they had a separate department for African-American interpretation and presentations. And then that disappeared. And then the way in which slavery was talked about and kind of costumed, literally, also altered over time. And I would argue that came around the same time as there was much more of a corporate feel to that space, and archaeology was kind of pushed further and further to the margins in terms of just research. From there, I traveled to the great state of Tennessee to hang out at Andrew Jackson's little 2,000-acre plantation, and really, really tried to engage, which became my dissertation, but I really tried to write an entire dissertation without mentioning Andrew Jackson, but it didn't work. And my committee said, you can't write him out. And I'm like, but he wrote everyone else out, so, but doesn't work that way. So the reason why I'm kind of setting that up is because for me, part of the reasons why I got into archaeology is because, what is going on with my computer? I'm sorry, 1 second. Okay, great. Sorry, my cat actually spilled iced tea on my computer 3 days ago. So I'm hoping that I stay with you and everyone can hear me. Let's hope. Okay. So the reason why I'm saying this is because I really, to be honest, did not see myself in the practice of archaeology, the ways in which archaeology was taught to me, right, as a graduate student. I did not see, I saw the implications and the ways that I could actually impact archaeology, but I still didn't see myself reflected in it. And I was in a space that was extremely rare. So I was at Colonial Williamsburg, and the folks that were my immediate kind of, my immediate folks at Colonial Williamsburg was Maria Franklin from University of Texas, who became my advisor. I'm her first PhD student. Anna Agby Davies was there, Wyoni Edwards Ingram was there, Cheryl LaRoche was there. And if you know anything about historical archaeology, those names are actually kind of the core of that. That was, you know, my crew. I am from the Bronx forever. So I am of the hip hop generation. So there might be inflections of hip hop in my talk. But the idea is that that's what I thought archaeology was, right? And then I went to the world and it was like, oh, so everyone is not Maria and Anna and Wyoni and Cheryl. So, okay. And so it was eye-opening for me. And then sticking to the field of archaeology has been, I've questioned it many times, but to be honest, I know it's because I know the feeling of what it's like to be at a site, to touch that material, right? And to understand the implications that my words have on a piece of history. I don't want to get corny and, you know, all teary-eyed or anything, But, you know, I really do love the practice of archaeology. I don't always love the politics of archaeology, and archaeology is inherently political. And if we don't think that, then, oh well. But and I'm unapologetic about my love for archaeology, but also pushing archaeology to really, really push us to see ourselves reflected in the ways we interpret material culture. And I say this because and let me go ahead and share my screen. I am going to probably skip around a little bit. Oh, that's attractive. Hold on. There was a Twitter meme going around that was, it's the professor going, 1 second, let me just get this. So I'm gonna go through these slides rather quickly because I want to get to kind of the end and then put in my agenda and my politics as I go on, because that's what I'm here to do. So that idea of for me really started out, the idea of, oh, well, this is the other slideshow. Okay, so I was fascinated by this idea of domestic spaces, right? This idea of how the built environment is one thing, but how does archaeology kind of help us tell the story of those who have been written about? Like, these are folks that, you know, had their own stories, had their own histories, but how am I, right? Here I am, I'm from the Bronx, this is Co-op City. And I like to show this slide because although, yes, I grew up on the 16th floor of a 33-story building, which is, as my cursor, this is my building that I grew up right there. But I also like to show that there are water and trees. And, you know, we have the Bronx Zoo and the New York Botanical Garden. So in the Bronx and the Yankees. So we do have stuff, right? Outdoorsy stuff. But what that is when you grow up in an apartment, you don't have this idea of what does the yard space mean to me, right? So then I became obsessed with this idea of the ways in which on a plantation situation or context, how are folks living outdoors? What are they leaving behind? What am I finding? And how do I understand, you know, these, okay. And so, like, I always show this to my students because I'm, you know, pro bono. I am definitely a 70s baby. But at the same time, there's like a little bit of a remix in there. On the left is my mom and I in Taiwan. So I went to kindergarten in Taiwan, and that was, my mom was getting her master's, and she and my dad had the split. But also, this probably why I'm such a, why I can really understand Du Bois's ideas about communism and all kinds of things, because my Black revolutionary past is definitely entrenched in the way that I see the world and the ways in which I see race kind of meandering through the things that, even when we don't want to admit that it is there. This is not working well. Okay. These are my, wait, stop. These are my, you know, street cred photos. We're just gonna move past that. Okay, so this idea of archaeology. So this is myself in the middle. That's myself and former director of archaeology, Larry McKee. But for me, what archaeology created was a way to kind of use the way I saw the world and the way I saw myself in the world. And archaeology was, because I started out as a historian, but archaeology to me was, I don't know how to explain it. And I think many of you might understand what that feels like, but it really was for me a more tangible, realistic way to talk about the past of and to find my ancestors within spaces or stories of people who were like my ancestors, in the story of America, in the story of Andrew Jackson, who was the first common man president, quote unquote. But, you know, he had 130 taxable captives, which meant that there were probably upwards of 200 people on his plantation, because taxable is, it depends. In Tennessee, it was between the ages of, I believe it was 12 and 55 or 60. So there's a whole bunch of people that are above that age and below that age that are not technically counted for tax purposes. So if you look at the average plantation owner that owned human beings, you're talking about an average of less than between 5 and 7. He had over probably about 200. So there's nothing common about Andrew Jackson's story, except the fact that he married Rachel Donaldson, who was the daughter of one of the founders of Nashville. So much like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, he married well and became the president. Just thought I'd put that in there. Oh, that's me, much younger. And I, to be honest, the t-shirt I have on is actually the arrival, which is 1619. It was a celebration of Africans arriving to Jamestown. So yeah, I don't keep it light even on the site. So for me, it was also understanding about being a Northerner, being someone who grew up in an apartment. However, my family is both sides of my family are all from North Carolina by way of Jamaica and the Eastern Band Cherokee, which are the ones who actually did not travel on the Trail of Tears, but remained in Eastern and Central North Carolina. They are, so in my own lineage, my folks became either Black, mulatto, or white. And so it's an interesting story about the kinds of ways in which race is changed and shifted over time, politics, et cetera. And to be honest, right now, I know that, in terms of especially Eastern Band Cherokee, there are probably about 200 people left on the planet that speak the language. And when I found that out, literally last week, it caused some pain in the sense that I don't know about my great great grandfather, who was the one that became one of those civilized folks and stayed in North Carolina, and how that how that will shift my work, I don't know, we'll see. But for me, the ideas of the ways in which people impact their environment, the ways that people's lives are lived outside in an environment where everyone is kind of condensed in a single space. And at the Hermitage, sorry, I'll go back, these two structures, this structure right here was actually Jackson's original Jackson's original cabin. It was 2 stories. They brought it down to 1 story after the mansion was completed. But this structure here was basically the model for all the structures on the plantation that housed captive folk. And it was 20 by 40. So it would be 20 by 20 feet for each family. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of living outdoors. He was pretty militaristic in the sense that these were almost like barracks. Every single one was 20 by 40. And these were the last wooden structures on the property. After this, it was pretty much made by bricks that were all fired by enslaved hands and built by enslaved people. So they built their own cabins as well as the mansion that Jackson lived in. So the idea of excavating, I had to find like everything, like this is going to tell me the story and I'm going to be able to read the artifacts and everything will be fine. Well, the truth is that what happens when you are in a space where people sweep, wow, the delay in I think there's a little bit of a delay, sorry. Oh gosh. Come on, you can do it. You can do it, computer. Okay. The idea behind the ways and the spaces in which folks lived and socialized and cooked and all of this was kind of the center of what I wanted to find, or what I was looking for. And I think that is what I found. I would say, I'm not going to go into this in detail because I feel like it's in the book. I've written about it a lot. But the idea of spaces that are not necessarily sacred, but are an essential space that people learn how to navigate the life under slavery. Because I have to remind people, especially when I come to talking about archaeology and race, that one has to learn how to live as a captive person. It is not something that is automatic. It is something that you have to train your children. Many, in the ways that we, like I am raising 2 sons and a daughter, and I know that I have to have several talks with both of my sons. My 14-year-old son is probably about 6 feet already. And so I know that from the time that he was, I don't know, probably about 9 or 10, he's not seen as a child. And these are the kinds of implications that we cannot ignore when we're thinking about the past and trying to bring folks to understand the parallels and the ways in which slavery in the past is still in many ways extended into our present. To me, I can do that by talking about a plantation and talking about the ways in which slavery is taught. And then from there, enter into a conversation with young people about how that has implications on today's society and the ways we see each other in terms of race. Okay. I just like to show me pointing at ashes. So it's not, it's, yeah. So I will talk a little bit about this feature. It's Tennessee, right? So that's why we call it a barbecue pit. Even though my folks are from North Carolina, so the barbecue tastes a little different. So this, what we call the barbecue pit, because at the bottom of it was not only burnt clay, but there was a half of a pig skull and a 2-tonged fork that was at the bottom with a lot of burn stuff in it. And so I, often joked and said, just in case, as archaeologists, we were completely clueless, the ancestors left us some messages so that way we know that they were cooking in that pit. But also this feature we found on the last day of the last season, literally as we were looking to clean up. And yeah, this was a feature that haunted me because I had to get back to Texas to go back to school. And it was like, why is this here? And why have we been digging around here for months? And really on the last day, so that is archaeology. And again, what is seen here as feature 820, which is the fire pit, is what that barbecue pit was. And I just do want to point out that the mansion itself would be down here. And from what we have with maps, because we only found the bottom part of this structure that we know was 20 by 40 feet, it actually blocks the fire pit itself, the barbecue pit. So what the argument is that and we found artifacts, all kinds of artifacts in that space, which to me was why I described it as kind of the hearth of the home. If you're talking about the home as being all of these collective folks living in the same space and gathering together at this fire pit the way it was. And these are some of the artifacts that were in that central area. And I like to throw in this picture because it is actually filmed at the site. This is Roots Christmas. I would say almost everything in here is part of a set, except for these 2 structures. But it just shows you how Hollywood can, I don't know. I just like Roots Christmas because it was filmed at the Hermitage. That's why I show that. So I'm gonna jump really quickly because I could go on forever, but I don't want to. So I just want to talk a little bit about Andover. This stuff is from Lucy Foster's site. And part of the reason why I wanted to pursue Lucy Foster's site was because it was called Black Lucy's Garden. And I hated that name. And in many ways, being in Massachusetts and I guess having my first entrance into kind of what the Black presence in Massachusetts was through Du Bois from Great Barrington. It was a very different time that he lived, and his story was very different. But Lucy Foster was something that was on my mind, especially because not necessarily the Bullens who excavated it in the 40s, but it was the reinterpretation by Vernon Baker, which made me pause a lot. And it was because the use of the quote unquote plantation model that folks like Stanley South were using in Florida, the idea of poverty and race, or the assumption of poverty because Lucy Foster in the final years of her life was on the public dole, but never left her house until she was injured in a fire. And that, I think, led to her death. But I'm not an expert on Lucy Foster, but materially, she was not poor. Materially, she was wealthy. And that was like such a minute detail to me, because as I looked at the artifacts that came from her house, I was like, this is some serious stuff. Like, how is it talking about this idea of poverty and Lucy Foster? Like, not Lucy Foster, to me, was someone that, and I'm not even going to say all this was passed down or she got it from the tavern. It was all these different stories that I was reading. And for me, I was literally looking at the material, and the material was forcing me to say, this is not impoverished. This is someone who was valued. This was someone who, even though she was left an acre and a cow and a little bit of money, her former mistress did not have, the town still found a way to provide these things for her. She had a space of importance, or at least it is a potential interpretation of Lucy Foster's life in Andover. So to me, like, materially, like, I would, jump up and down if I found all of this stuff. This is just an example of the stuff that was found. And it's the kinds of things that at the Hermitage, we find eyeglass pieces. We're like, oh my goodness, literacy, and here are thimbles and scissors, and you're talking about industry and seamstressing and all of these kinds of things that people got excited about finding them in the plantation, in a plantation context, but yet Lucy Foster was impoverished even though she was a freed woman. And for me, it also helped to think about Cheryl LaRoche's work on African Americans or freed Black folk that were a part of the Underground Railroad before the notoriety of white folks that became kind of what the abolitionist was, right? But if you are escaping captivity, there might be the idea that you actually would trust someone that looked like you before you would take the chance and run and escape to someone because they had like a special quilt outside of their house. So I just wanted to, Cheryl LaRoche talks about the ways in which, folks of African descent were involved with the Underground Railroad in ways that weren't legible to who is writing about that past, right? So this more artifacts. So now I want to jump to, I can't believe I just forgot the name of the school. Oh my goodness. So I want to jump to
An academy.
Thank you. So I got an email, and I'm going to end kind of with this story. So I got this email from a teacher who was teaching at Penguin Hall Academy.
Yes.
And I went there a couple of times and we had a great time. But this was a group of young women who were trying to tell trying to find a story to tell locally about someone, you know, of African descent. And they did the research and they found Lucy Foster. They found, I gave them article by Anthony Martin, as well as the chapter in about Lucy Foster in my book. And the relationship, you know, came together, and their mission was to highlight the life of Lucy Foster and provide a headstone for where she's buried. And I have to say that as an archaeologist, this is one of those things that I never thought I would kind of see. So it was extremely emotional. So the John Updike's son is a carver that does period headstones, and he's the one that actually designed and did the actual headstone here. That's not a good image. Let's see, this one, they have in the front Lucy Foster, 1767 to 1843, born into captivity in Boston, came to her freedom in Andover, known by God and her community. So this was, we had a ceremony for, this was approximately where we believe that she would be buried based on the ties that she had, you know, in terms of the folks that owned her at one time. She was freed when she was 16. So this was like seeing the work that I had done thinking about Lucy Foster, but never really thinking that it would become this full circle kind of situation. And I think that for me, it was one of those moments where as a Black archaeologist, it really made me understand the power of the past and the power that we can have if we're in conversation. And that for me was an extremely important thing. And also, I'm just throwing in a couple of slides of these are high school students from Springfield, when we used to get together in person, but and I'm showing them the Du Bois papers. And so I'm thinking, I also think about, in many ways, the archive to me as also an artifact. And I'm gonna, and also for me, it's very important to take scholars. These are Du Bois fellows. Take scholars to look at, these are Du Bois artifacts. And it is important that they see, this is the tangible things. Like, y'all think the artifacts of the archives are the only thing. Let's talk about the material culture of people, right? And what that says about where they lived and the items that they chose. I need to skip over this. This is Eleuthera, sorry, Bahamas. So I'm gonna end with something I uplifted, and now I'm just gonna bring it home with some not happy thoughts. So the direction of my book, sorry, I just made myself write on the book. The direction of some of my research right now is actually to talk about materiality and the implications on the large amount of Black and Brown and Indigenous folks that are that die at the hands of police and or vigilantes. And I'm not using a police one right now. I'm actually using a vigilante case. In this case, it's the hooded sweatshirt of Trayvon Martin. And for me, it's the implication of, let's really quickly go over a really quick synopsis of the story, okay? So you have a young African-American male who it's starting to drizzle. He's coming from the store, going back to his father's house. He doesn't live there, but he stays there from time to time. It's a gated community. He has a hoodie because it's drizzling, yet someone sees him as a threat. Now, do they see him as a threat because he has a hood on? Or do they see him as a threat because he is a young Black man with a hood on? However, the part for me, the material part for me, is the power and the symbol that the hoodie has after the murder of Trayvon Martin. The fact that a hoodie from this point forward is not ever, to me, is not just a hoodie. There was a whole social media campaign of people, families, whole families having a hood on in solidarity with the life of this 17-year-old young man. So it is about the implication. It is the implications of things such as Sandra Bland not turning on her signal, right? And I've been in the midst of trying to write a piece on how Sandra Bland's cell, actually what is in Sandra Bland's cell, to reflect her suicidal thoughts as the official report is, or what is it that she leaves behind to tell her story? What she leaves behind is a social media platform that she created, ironically, 6 months before her passing, called Sandy Speaks. And the ways in which activists in Texas used that is for 47 hours, the time that she spent in that jail cell is how long they looped Sandy Speaks through a projector with sound on this is actually on the side of the jailhouse. And they did that for 47 hours to bring her voice back to the space or the structure in which she lost her life. They're using her words, her image, her face, and they're using it on the actual space that they believe is where she lost her life. So that's material in another way. Michael Brown, his own body in Ferguson, becomes the material object. And so I just want to end by saying that for me, I can end this here because I really want to say that one of the things that really struck me materially on January 6th, 2021, was to see the Confederate battle flag in the Capitol, to see the ways in which people in a mob mentality or a mob situation, the violation of our democracy was and I'm using phallocentric terms purposely as a Black feminist, the penetration of the Capitol building by people who had a relationship with the material in there that is unique. It is the portraits, it is the statues, it is, hitting police over the head with the American flag. It is those kinds of material conversations, to me, are so exciting to think about as an archaeologist thinking about contemporary archaeology. And so I'm never going to abandon the dirt, although I'm older now and my back hurts, so I don't want to do that. But the truth is that material is at the center of everything that I understand. So it's everywhere, in every aspect of the way I see the world, it's important. And I just wanted to end with that January 6th, because that Confederate battle flag and the use of talking about 1876, like that was a good year. For some of us, 1876 meant the compromise, right, that led to the beginning of Jim Crow. Not really a happy moment for African Americans. So for senators, who I will not name because I don't want to give them that credit, but invoking that year was very, very deep for me, as well as seeing that Confederate flag in the rotunda of the Capitol building that was built during or completed by Lincoln during the Civil War. All of these things unfortunately, that I've noticed is that many of my students don't know these connections. And for me, it's the material that actually helps me to connect the past, the present, and hopefully what we'll learn and then do a little bit differently in the future. So I'm going to end right there and open it up. I'm pretty sure I've taken up way too much time, but I just had so much to say. Okay.
It's all good and everything. I will say before we get to some of the questions that we have already, I just want to let everyone know that the carvings on Lucy Foster's headstone were actually the young women, the group came to the Peabody and looked at her material culture and took photos of some of the designs from like the teacups and plates and stuff. And they incorporated all of that into the design of the headstone.
And in the back of the headstone is the design from that one of the teacups that they loved, and that's I didn't show that photo, and the dove, and yeah, it it was a labor of love for them, but they were committed to the very end, and it was beautiful to see that come together.
Yeah, and they did as much as they could to make it very personal to Lucy herself, right? So just it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So our first question is, you mentioned that Andrew Jackson was very regimented with construction, the 20 by 20 barrack style buildings. There are how-to guides for plantation layouts in the Caribbean, like Labourie's 18th century book. Do you see similar literature or guides influencing plantation landscapes development in the Chesapeake?
Yes. There I would I would say that with Jackson, it can be potentially difficult to tell if he was reading or being influenced by kind of plantation models of, you know, the most efficient ways to build housing. And I say this because he didn't write down a lot. A, he was not Jefferson. B, he was not there a lot. He was still, as he was merging in more into a political life, he left a lot of the oversight to his wife a little bit, and then they adopted Rachel Donaldson's there were twins. The Jacksons took one of the twins, the nephew, and adopted him as their son. Um, but it's really hard to tell if Jackson was influenced. I'm sure he would have seen this, these kinds of not tell-alls, but the best practices, plantation models that were coming mostly out of like the deeps, like New Orleans, not necessarily New Orleans, but like Louisiana and places like that. And he did have a need quite quickly because he had a small group of folks and he had a plantation in Kentucky. Yes. And then he sold that and his population like literally doubled within a very short span of time. And this is as the mansion was being completed. So the idea was that they would continue to erect structures with the bricks, and each of them were 20 by 40, which would house two families. So the former, what we call the first Hermitage, because it was the first structure that he lived in that was 2 stories, that one was an anomaly because it was wood, and then we know it was 2 stories because of some, the architecture. The floor joists were actually ceiling beams at one time. They were decorated, and so we didn't find that until we dug under the structure. So I don't know. I would venture to argue that it was a combination of his kind of idea of barracks, even though they're families, and the idea of kind of best practices for plantation management.
Great. The second question is really good. Do you experience racial battle fatigue studying and teaching and talking about enslavement and plantations? If so, how do you manage it?
every single day. Oh God. Sorry. Let me breathe. Yes. I don't know how to answer that. Um, I think I think the example of the headstone that's now in that the cemetery of the church in which um, in which Lucy Foster attended. Lucy Foster served. I think that to me, those are those kinds of moments that um, reward me enough to keep going, as well as the fact of knowing, younger archaeologists that struggle with trying to find how their experiences can shape the discipline. I know that also seeing organizations such as the Society for Black Archaeologists and their success, and knowing I was there when it was like three of us that actually attended, meetings and stuff, and it has grown, but it has grown because we have folks that are all over the planet, and that to me is is promising because my mentor and my mentor and my advisor, Maria Franklin, paved the way for me, and I hopefully continue to pave the way for others. But it's also about a conversation and knowing that I have several, white, Latinx, and indigenous comrades who believe me. I check in and they check in on me all the time, and I think that it's important that we continue to have these conversations because I agree, Tristan is saying a whole lot of comments right now, and I appreciate them, but mental health wise it's rough, and if we don't check in with each other and we don't understand, then it can become very burdensome. But also the idea that now it's no longer acceptable to say you didn't know, right? Or you don't know, or you need to read some indigenous archaeology. You need to read, if you're looking at Mexico, I don't know, maybe you should find a Mexican archaeologist, or Peru or Ecuador, or, so these are concepts that, and I'm in the same department as Sonia Adalai, right? So, when it's like Black feminist archaeology and community-based archaeology, and we're just, hanging out. But at the same time, sometimes our own colleagues don't recognize who we are in the greater world. And they just see us as, oh, they're just our colleagues. Nah, we're not just your colleagues. We're your colleagues that are pushing the field in a way that we hope will be open, but also change those who are in it already.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and going, so sort of the last thing, going to one of Tristan's comments is using, sort of the Native American narrative to help understand, how you look at African American Black archaeological sites, because there's been a lot of, I think, work done with that in terms of working more now, at least with indigenous archaeologists, and collaboration through that, and not just being like, we're white and we know what we're doing and we're just going to trample over everything. So
Yeah, well, for me, because here's the thing, right? Like I have no problem, saying that, checking off two boxes, right? I'm of African descent and I'm indigenous, but I'm racialized as Black. And I know that ancestrally, I cannot ignore my indigenous ancestors. They don't really allow it. And I'm not going to get into the spiritualism of that, but they don't really allow you to forget. So the ideas are that as I learn and I teach my own children, right? So, my husband is Haitian American. So there's a whole other, like everybody should celebrate Haitian independence personally, but you don't know that until you are in the midst or married to, right? The idea of freedom, right? Like, why does everyone just know Toussaint Louverture? They don't know Christophe. They don't know, like, Haitian independence changed the United States. It changed the ways in which people dealt with, right? So it's not, let's talk about John Brown as not as an insane white dude, right? Let's talk about him as someone who caused extreme discomfort because he was whiter than white, yet dedicated to his dying day to free his brothers and sisters in bondage. So much so that even Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass were like, well, I think you're doing a little too much, John. But okay. So the ways in which I know that as I begin to learn who I am, right? I know that my colleague and friend Sonia has helped me immensely to talk about the ways in which, because for my group down in North Carolina, we survived, or they survived based on being hidden in plain sight. So when I've taken an example, this is kind of random, but I think it kind of speaks to what's going on. So when I would take my children to a function, right, and they know they're Eastern Band, and they're like, well, how come we don't have, like, regalia? We can't be in the circle. And I'm like, no, you can be in the circle, but as Eastern Band, we don't have, like, we don't have no outfits, all right? I can have a direction shirt, right? But we can't get in there because we became less Indian in order to be racialized to fit into this black-white binary. And that's very sad because I'm just learning about this as I enter into, and I look good for my age, as I enter into my 50th year. So I know that I'm going to learn more, but I did that through my children. But it's really sad to be like, at a powwow, like, damn, I'm just going to sit on the side. But I don't. But I know that it has been through my colleagues and my interactions with my Indigenous, especially sisters, but brothers as well, that I have learned that it's okay to say that I'm Black and I'm proud and still be Indigenous, right? Because I'm not going to talk about the racism in Indigenous American situation or US situations, but I don't know if that answered it. I just kind of went off.
So. No, I love it. So thank you. We won't take up any more of your time, and thank you to all our viewers.
Thank you so much.
And so everyone join us in our next lecture, which is February 24th, and we will be joined by Dr. Ryan Wheeler, who will be speaking about publishing in archaeology. And again, we rely on support of viewers like you, so consider supporting our outreach by becoming a member of the Massachusetts Archaeological Society. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Battle-Baptiste. This was fantastic and wonderful, and I love it. So
thank you so much. Everyone stay safe. Have a great day and a great week. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.